And I'm curious if you could maybe share some learnings on pricing with us, because this is something that a lot of illustrators struggle with, is understanding pricing. And maybe if you could, obviously not specifics, but if you could share your foundation on how you approach it, I think it would help a lot of young illustrators out there.
Yeah, yeah, it's a classic question and a tricky one to answer, but I think it's always really uh, damaging to start, as you say, throwing out specifics prices for things, because that's one of the biggest factors that have helped in a bad way freeze illustration rates and fees for the last few decades. An
Right.
editorial fee from 10 years ago is not too dissimilar to what it is now. And
Yeah.
there's lots of other reasons which would take too long to go into as to why that might be. But I really do think one of the reasons is that sometimes people in university settings or lectures or whatnot get told, oh, you should charge £500 for this kind of work, and everyone writes it down, and then that's the handbook that they follow for the next decade or more, and you're there going, hang on a minute, you need to be always thinking about what the value of your work, what you're giving the client, where it's going, and whether you can push that rate up. If the client really
Yeah.
wants to work with you, they will have the budget, and they will probably be able to stretch to get into whatever the price is that you tell them. Obviously, it's really difficult to know where the starting point of all of that is, and that's where
Yeah.
conversations with other illustrators really helps, because then you can say, oh, I've got this job. I've never done a job like this before. Do you have you? And do you mind me asking sort of how much you charged, even if it's a ballpark amount? And then you
Yeah.
can start to evaluate. Every single illustrator is different. If you're having a conversation with someone that works traditionally and in a very detailed way, they're going to be charging more for their illustration because it's going to take longer.
Yeah.
It's a much more detailed, original piece of work. Um, that's a really simplistic example. But another way that I think is really helpful, if you're really there, sort of scratching your head and thinking, I just don't know where to start, then you can look at a kind of broader remit of how much a creative gets paid on an annual basis. Say if they're in a design agency, so like a graphic designer, perhaps a design agency starting out might be
Mhm.
on, I don't know, I'm going to invent a number here, so apologies to graphic designers if this is way off, but 25k a year or
Yeah.
28k a year. And then increasing, obviously, the more experience they get throughout their career, they're going to be hopefully getting up to a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So if you're fresh out of university and you're thinking, right, okay, what do I need to survive as a person? How much is my rent? How much are my bills? How much do I spend on food per month? It's great to do. I remember doing it was actually thanks to my dad for recommending me this one, is do a money calculator. Just figure
Yeah.
out how much money you're going to be spending every month. That's at minimum the amount that you're hopefully aiming for to be earning, and then you obviously want to be trying to earn a bit more than that, so you can put money away for tax, put money away for, dare I say it, a pension,
Yeah.
savings, that kind of thing, the boring adult stuff. And then you start to think, okay, well, this is how much I should be earning throughout the whole year. Then you can divide that by 12, so you've got your month rate, and then you can start to be thinking, okay, where am I getting into here? What I know we shouldn't be thinking about day rates as illustrators unless you're working on particular kind of work for hire jobs with design agencies and so on. But it's a good starting point to think, oh, hang on, I know how much money I'd like to make this month or this year. If I break that down into weeks and days, what does that really mean? And where can I go from that? What stage in my career am I at?
Mm.
Obviously, there's loads more ways to kind of approach pricing. If you can work for a big brand, then
Yeah.
charge more, please charge more. If you're working for a wonderful local charity
Yeah.
that's doing amazing work and you want to do a bit of pro bono, or you want to discount your rate, that's up to you, and go for it. One final little tip that I'd like to throw out there, is if you do ever do any kind of pro bono or discounted work with a charity, and remember, charities do have money, they're not people
Mm.
give them money, they get money from all sorts of directions, so they can pay illustrators. but is if you do an invoice or a quote for a charity, or in that sense, is that you can put on there how much you would have charged, and then showing them the discount rate that you're giving them. And by doing that, it not only underlines how much of a professional illustrator you are, but it also gives them the opportunity to come back to you for more work. And at that point, they're not surprised if you go, well, this is how much it is, or if they recommend you to someone else, then they know
Yeah.
that they're recommending someone that charges money rather than it's just a freebie machine.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you said some really fantastic things in there. If I were to summarize, the key, I think, is understanding value, the value of illustration. And I think a lot of illustrators lack this understanding of what value illustration brings to businesses. The better we take time to understand the value of illustration, the better we'll be able to price. So, like you said, for instance, a mom and pop or a charity is not going to be able to afford a lot of money. And so giving them a ridiculously high quote is not going to get you that job. Whereas a giant corporate brand like Facebook or any of those big, corporates, the value they are going to put in the illustration is going to be huge, and so the price you can charge is going to be big, because if you think about where it's going to be used, how it's going to be used, and what value that is going to bring to the brand, it's going to make a larger impact for them than, say, for a mom and pop. And so if we can keep that in mind, then we can start to understand the basis on how we charge.
Yeah.
And like Dave said, it's there's a reason why there aren't fixed rates, because we have to also think about the economy, the fact that every year there is higher and higher levels of inflation. And so we need to accommodate our pricing for that inflation. And a lot of times what happens is we get stuck on this fixed rate and it doesn't accommodate for that. So people still think 250 for like half a page of an editorial, but inflation rate, they're charging more for the magazine. So they should increase their budget for illustrations.
Yeah. I think another thing to throw in there is, once you start conversations with a clients are real people. They're not
Yeah.
they're not an email, they're not a robot. I mean, not yet anyway.
Yeah.
But they're people that you can start to have human conversations with, like normal one-to-one, and when you get into it's some people struggle with talking about money. That's normal, that's okay. But the more you do it, the more confident you'll get, the more you'll be able to have those chats with the client. And if a client's there going, we're sorry, this is over our budget, then you can start to ask things like, well, what is your budget for this?
Yeah.
And then you can start to have a conversation about what you can do for that budget. And maybe it's just as simple as dropping one of the illustrations if it's a multi-illustration job, or making some of the illustrations a little bit simpler, removing a few elements from them so they're not going to take so long. Or maybe you can get into talking to them about the license usage. Quite often clients come in going, we want to buy out, we want to use illustrations forever and ever, and you can question that and say, well, hang on, that's going to cost loads of money, and this is why. And there's loads of great information out there about licensing and the areas around it. In fact, you should check out Karis Inc., a wonderful illustrator who I know, who's in the Bristol area, and she's got fantastic blogs on her website. I'll send you a link, Ashwin, and you can put it in the notes or something. She's got some wonderful articles on licensing and her perspective on it, as obviously have the AOI and lots of other areas on the internet. And you can have conversations with the clients. Maybe you're if you're only going to be using the illustrations for a year or for 3 years, then here's a lower cost to accommodate for that license. So what you're doing there is you're having a conversation with the client and helping unpick what they're doing with the artwork.
Yeah, I think that is such an important part, having a conversation and understanding that everything's negotiable, just like in a conversation, right? You come to the best contracts and the best jobs are ones where you both compromise and you both leave feeling happy about that compromise. And so if you can understand and approach every job interview like that, you're going to be so much happier, and your business is going to be so much better.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.